We are at the climax of the story in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. In this scene, Lungqual and Fogg are awaiting Deep Thought to announce the answer to the great question after 7.5 million years of calculation. So this is how the story goes. "You're really not going to like it," observed Deep Thought. "Tell us." "All right," said Deep Thought. "The answer to the great question of life, the universe, and everything is 42. And then confused silence follows, and then Lungqual and Fogg discusses with Deep Thought that really the question was not clear, it is too general. And now that they have the ultimate answer, they need a computer that will calculate the ultimate question. But Deep Thought is only the second greatest computer in the universe. An even greater computer is required to calculate this. And this is where the story continues. But I'll tell you who can. "Tell us, who?" "I speak of none other than the computer that is to come after me. A computer whose merest operational parameters I'm not worthy to calculate, and yet I will design it for you. A computer which can calculate the question to the ultimate answer. A computer of such infinite and subtle complexity that organic life itself shall form part of its operational matrix. And you yourselves shall take on new forms and go down into the computer to navigate its 10 million year program. Yes, I shall design this computer for you, and I shall name it also unto you, and it shall be called the Earth." Now, first of all, if you've not read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, this is action number 1 from this video. Grab a copy and read it during the holidays. Second, Douglas Adams was a genius. I think he got so many things right in this book that it's unbelievable, and I think it's more relevant today than it was 30 years ago or 40 years ago when the book was written. Because today there is lots of discussion about artificial general intelligence. Some fear it, some wait for it as nirvana, but I think what Douglas Adams is talking about here is the human advantage. And this is what this video is going to be about today. I'm Zsolt, welcome to Visual PKM, and this is going to be a summary of the extended mind. But first we need to talk about some of the misconceptions about the mind. First of all, the mind, the brain, is not a computer. This misconception originated in the 1960s, and it's wrong. We are not good at arithmetics. We will not do the same calculation as you would run the same program on a computer on a sunny day or a cloudy day. It's going to do the same calculation and come to the same result. We are context sensitive. On a sunny day, we are going to have a good mood. On a cloudy day, we are going to have a bad mood, and that is going to result in different outcomes. We are not computers. And also, the mind is not a muscle. The brain is a different type of organ. It's not a muscle. It doesn't get stronger with mind exercises. There is a way to become more intelligent, but that is not through the way of doing all sorts of strange exercises, but it's through the way of understanding how our mind reacts to its environment. Because our mind, your mind, is like a nest building bird. It takes on many different personas, and it builds its nest of thoughts out of everything around it. And this everything includes our bodies, our surroundings, and our relationships. And in this video, I'm going to cover 28 personas of the mind, so to say 28 ways our mind thinks with its environment. So let's jump in and let's quickly review what these 28 are. So first, let's talk about our bodies, and let's start with thinking with sensations. And the first persona to think about here is the nature observer. The observer who patiently studies the patterns in the environment, in herself or himself, and who notices what survives and what thrives, notices different feelings that arise when you're in different situations. And by honing your capability to observe how you feel, you will get such a great advantage, because often our gut feel comes much earlier than our mind puts the picture together. And this is where the detective comes in. So our mind is also like a detective. It takes these puzzle pieces of how I feel, what I observe externally, what I think, what logic tells me, and like Columbo, tries to put together the case and to come to a final judgment. And finally, our mind can be like a paramedic, which anticipates the stressful situations and prepares for it. And when the event happens, then the mind is able to perform in a calm and focused manner. And this is in sharp contrast with people who do not observe their feelings, do not put together the picture, and therefore they arrive in a stressful situation unprepared. They scramble, they stress, and they underperform. Then our mind thinks with movement. The first persona here is the sculptor, using movement, activity to moderate our thinking. These are called self-referential movements, when we try to explain a concept to ourselves through our movements, through our gestures. That is our feedback loop. But we are also athletes, because physical activity, different levels of physical activity, has different impact on our mind. Sitting still is not good, because then we lose energy. Low energy movement or low intensity activity helps us focus. That is the best way to think. And then high intensity activity can give us this feeling of calm, because essentially what happens is when we are in high intensity activity, then the brain from our frontal lobe is taken down to our body to sustain our muscles, and effectively it calms down, because the frontal lobe doesn't get that much energy, and it becomes quieter. And finally, our mind has the persona of a dancer, because it uses movements to mirror ideas, and that way help others to think with you, but also help you yourself think better as well. And then finally, as we talk about the body, we need to talk about gestures. And here we need to start with the pre-verbal communicator, reaching back to our early childhood, and actually reaching back to ancient times before speech was invented. We were already using gestures, and through gestures we are able to communicate. It has a primal role in communication. There are gestures, and this is where the conductor comes in, that help with pacing the conversation. These are purposeful gestures that help the audience maintain attention. And then we have the Pantomime Artist, who uses gestures to act out certain ideas, because that again helps the audience understand what you're saying. It is not just talking, but it's also showing that this is what I think. And by the way, using gestures also helps you with the fluency of your speech, because our gestures precede the words that we say. We are actually triggering the words with our gestures, not the other way around. Now, moving on, let's talk about our surroundings, and let's talk about the 9 personas I have here. Our minds respond to nature differently, and that's because our ancestors were sort of on this constant camping trip. Their life was a big camping trip. Only very recently have we moved to cities, and our minds are really not designed to live in cities. Our minds are designed to live in nature. We are calm in nature. Our mind is used to the different patterns in nature. And so the first persona here is the gazer, because shifting your perspective, gazing into the distance, into the expansive nature, gives you this feeling of awe, and that is what you need to make mindset shifts and to really come up with new big ideas. But then there's the personality of the camper, and this reaches back to research that demonstrates that after about 3 days of hiking, people's thinking patterns start to change and we become more creative. Therefore, to practice the camper personality, it is a good practice to go out in nature, to be disconnected for at least 3 days, and you will experience a new level of thinking and new ideas, fresh perspectives. And finally, we have the persona of the nurturer, the person who brings the outside in by cultivating this connection with nature, by nurturing plants, and by creating a natural environment indoors. By the way, this natural environment can also be achieved by big posters of mountains and anything that resembles the outside. We can trick our brains into feeling that it's outside already simply by using the color green. So there are different ways of nurturing the outside inside. And then there's this aspect of thinking with built spaces. The first persona I want to talk about here is the monk, who alternates between deep solitary work and strategic collaboration. And this is where the monasteries created this environment of secluded spaces and then communal areas, and that was ideal for this thinking approach. Then there's the nesting parent, who creates or personalizes his or her space in the office. You can personalize your space by having some personal objects there, maybe a photo of your family, maybe your favorite pen and cup. There are different ways to personalize your space, but again, research has shown that if you personalize your own working area, then you're going to be more productive in that area and your stress level is going to decrease. And then finally, there's the persona of the architect, who knows all of this and designs spaces that foster collaboration, but also solitary work, that creates an opportunity for personalizing spaces, that brings the outside in through cultivating plants and other stuff. And then finally, in terms of thinking with built spaces, we have the thinking with the space of ideas, starting with the cartographer, who charts out ideas, for example, by creating concept maps or double bubble maps or mind maps. There are many ways of doing that. Then there's the outline weaver, who organizes information spatially and even uses a big wall. I was part of projects where we had what's called a war room with big flip chart sheets on the wall and with the project plan and information all over the place. That helps us think better and organize our ideas spatially. And then finally, there's the chronicler, who takes notes, keeps a log of ideas of how those ideas developed. This reaches back to examples like Darwin's journal, people who took careful notes and then use these externalized notes, these externalized ideas to identify patterns and to thus come up with new and novel ideas. And then finally, let's move to this last group of personalities. Here I have 10 different personalities. This is about relationships. And we'll start with thinking with experts. And the first persona here is the imitator. In today's world and in, let's say, the last 200-300 years, individualism has grown. People look up to individualism, and that is our ideal. But that was not always like this. So back in Roman and Greek times, actually imitation was the basis of learning, and it still works today. Just think of your child, how he or she imitated you to learn. Humans are very good at imitating. We observe and mirror approaches, processes. We mirror the experts very precisely, and then we adopt it to our own use. So imitation still works today. It's not being a copycat. It is learning through the act of imitation. Then I have the pilot with a checklist. And this is a way to tap into expert experience by creating a checklist that helps you go through and handle complex, critical, repetitive tasks. One book I would recommend here is the Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande. I recommend reading it. It's a short book, but it will explain to you how checklists work and why they are so fantastic. And then finally, there's the Master and Apprentice. And here I'm going to talk about more the master side of the story, who applies modeling, scaffolding, coaching, and fading to help the apprentice learn. And of course, on the apprentice side, instead of passive learning, participating in experiments helps you gain hands-on understanding, and it will stick much better than just reading. Then moving on, we have the Thinking with Peers group. And here we start with the Conversationalist, who's able to strike up and maintain a thoughtful conversation with others. Then we have the Storyteller, who shares lessons and insights via compelling stories and enhances learning by relating it with emotions and relatable experiences. Then we have the Debater. Again, studies show that we think differently when we are debating with someone. And I think the easiest way to practice this persona is by seeking out groups that don't think the way you do. So avoiding the echo chamber and looking for places where you can actually debate with someone on an idea, and that is going to give you a new perspective, a new understanding. And finally, there's the persona of the tutor, who learns by explaining, by answering questions, and by simplifying the message. You also understand it much better. So usually the tutor learns as much or even more than the student. And therefore, in many schools, tutoring is one of the approaches of helping children build their own understanding. And then finally, thinking with groups. This is about turning on the Hive switch. So we start with the first persona here, the Hive Mind. We are very individualistic and driven and competitive, but then when something magical happens, the Hive switch is turned on, we become group aware, and as a group we become much more powerful than the individuals alone. And the Synchronizer, the next persona here, can help us, because by synchronizing physical movement or feelings, like going to a meal together, eating a spicy meal together is even better, or doing exercise together, mirroring the motions of others, we get into this synchronous mode, and that is the first step to turning on the Hive switch. And then we have the Knowledge Keeper. The Knowledge Keeper is the person who knows what. So in a transactive memory system, meaning that you have an organization and Joe knows this, Judith knows that, and then you have the Knowledge Keeper who knows what Joe knows and what Judith knows, and when that information is required, can relate that information. So that is my summary of the extended mind. You can think better with these 28 mind personas, and I recommend choosing your character based on the need of the situation. Of course, all these 28 are present all the time. It's all in our head, or actually not in our head, but external through our bodies, our relationships, and our surroundings. If you're in a specific situation, then you can focus your attention on being a better imitator, being a better storyteller, maybe nurturing your abilities to observe your feelings, so become a better nature observer, or just playing the nesting parent role by creating an environment in the office, bringing in some of your objects. I think these are all different approaches that you can choose depending on what you want to achieve. You can choose one of the personas out of these 28. The extended mind has fundamentally changed the way I think about thinking. I first read the extended mind 2 years ago in Cohort 2 of the Visual Thinking Workshop, and now I reread it in Cohort 11 of the Visual Thinking Workshop. And today I've created 3 different visual summaries of the extended mind, and I just wanted to give you a very quick overview of how these are different. Of course, you already saw the personas example. We just walked through that, and I'm going to link 2 links in the description because I have dedicated videos on the other 2 as well, but I just want to give you a very quick overview and then reflect on what I've learned out of this whole process. So this is the book on a page that I created in Cohort 2 of the Visual Thinking Workshop. And in this summary, I focus the summary around the practical approaches that you can take away. So around the habits that you can adopt, like externalizing information or keeping a journal. It's about understanding that the brain is context sensitive, and so then you can spatialize information or you can socialize information. You can do different things based on this. And finally, this idea that we are social creatures, which means that we need to generate cognitive loops that involves others, so looping with other people, looking for opportunities where we can connect with other people. And then more recently, so about a month ago, a couple of weeks ago, I published this video, which is more of a fantasy story form of delivery of the extended mind. I titled this story The Quest for the Extended Mind. It's a fun story where the sorceress, the mind, goes on a quest with the Knight of Embodied Cognition, and then the Rogue of Spatial Cognition, and the Sage of Social Cognition, and together they overtake or they win the battle with the monstrous AI. They do not defeat it, but they incorporate it into their thinking as the fourth big area of the extended mind. Now not only our body, our environment, and our relationships, but also technology. So what have I learned out of all of this? Well, first of all, reading the extended mind a second time was an absolutely good idea. At first, I was afraid that how am I going to create another book on a page? In Cohort 2, I created a book on a page already. So what am I going to do in Cohort 11 when we are reading the extended mind again? But this time around, I created 2 book on a pages. So that actually led me to understand that visual thinking is about far more than storing and retrieving ideas. It's how I think, it's how I engage with ideas, it's how I tell what I learned to others. It's a way of life. It's a mindset. And this takes me to the mindset visual thinking framework. And if you like this type of visual summary or want to create similar visual summaries and interconnected visual notes with Obsidian and the Sculptor plugin in Obsidian, then I recommend you check out the link in the video description to the visual thinking workshop. Cohort 12 will formally start at the end of January, but I recommend that you register for the workshop today as soon as possible, because there is lots of work to get through. There's a self-paced course that is very extensive and will give you a firm foundation that then you can practice in the workshop. The workshop is going to be a very collaborative group work type of let's create a visual book on a page summary together type of experience. So hopefully that is going to add lots of additional value to the self-paced course. But again, I cannot stress enough that you need to give yourself time. This is not a quick learning experience. There's lots to learn. I have lots to share. You need practice and you need to invest time. So check out the workshop, register it for today, and I hope to see you in Cohort 12. And finally, just to give you an overview, so this is, of course, how I think. So it's not just the book on the pages and the summaries that I create visually, but the storyline that I created for this video is also on this storyboard where I tracked the story and then I facilitated the presentation using the slideshow script. So I think this is indeed the way of life, the way of presentation, the way of thinking. And I really advocate that this is such a fun way to engage with ideas. Give it a try, get Obsidian, get Sculptor, join the visual thinking workshop, watch my channel to see other videos about visual thinking. I would really love to hear your thoughts, so please share any ideas in the comments below. If you disagree with something, that's also great. I want to practice my debater persona, so please share ideas that disagree with what I've said or share your experiences. Tell me what you've been doing with visual thinking and how you approach reading books. I'm interested in all your comments, and I hope to see you in the workshop. Thank you.